Katrina, why don't you start?
As I said, I'm a peer educator, and part of that peer education is with an organization called Lifeforce. It's a diverse group of women, some of which are HIV positive, who are trained to do peer education in their respective communities. So I've watched, and as an HIV positive woman, I too have suffered some of these symptoms that Tracy and Maxine will be talking about later. It's important for you to know that women are ill prior to any diagnosis of HIV, and that they often die of HIV complications without ever meeting the CDC definition of AIDS. That HIV progression in women is not adequately described or reflected, and that women are underdiagnosed for AIDS. Failure to look at HIV as a possible cause of our and there's a failure to look at HIV as a possible cause of our medical complaints by the CDC. AIDS diagnosis in women usually occurs like later on in our illnesses, and that we experience different problems from those of gay white men. A serious set of symptoms and clinical manifestations such as chronic pelvic inflammatory disease, warts, candidiasis, or cervical disorders. HIV disease is supposedly based on these clinical manifestations. At least that's how the definition was arrived, and yet not one gynecological symptom is listed in any of your categories. If HIV is not understood as a factor in these problems, then early intervention and prompt aggressive treatment may be delayed or overlooked. The CDC has not provided the needed leadership role that it needs to take in terms of the public or health professionals, that in women, the things that they're seeing in women and IBUDs, HIV illnesses has different medical manifestations, and that they need to note them and take on this leadership role. That it's sad that you allow women to be like misdiagnosed during a series of these illnesses, as I said, or these complaints, and that they often die without ever getting this AIDS diagnosis. Because of this, it like underrepresents the scope of this infection in women, particularly women of color or IBUDs. These symptoms should be listed now as like new opportunistic infections in women with HIV or AIDS. Early signs of immunocompromise and the recognition of these signs or symptoms is crucial in later determining the diagnosis of AIDS and treatment. The range of the symptoms may be as small as vaginal itching or irritations or sores or irregular bleedings, and escalating like to herpes or vaginal warts or abnormal pap smears, and ultimately escalating to cervical cancers. I mean, there is some action that really needs to be taken by CDC in terms of this, and some revisions that really need to be made, and that it's imperative for CDC to revise their definition of AIDS to now incorporate the symptoms or these signs of symptoms that we've been seeing experienced by HIV positive women into their definition and to their list of additional opportunistic infections for women. Information needs to be produced for a natural study of the history of HIV in women. As an HIV positive woman, I've watched and I've also experienced some of the symptoms that I've described earlier, and I'm noting it as like early progression to full-blown AIDS for women. And it's criminal that it's allowed to happen and keep developing. I don't trust the CDC or its definition, because it appears that from a distance people are watching as we progress on, me being one of those people that progress on, and knowing that these series of symptoms are in fact progression to full-blown AIDS, and they're not responding. Women die like 6 times faster than men with HIV or AIDS, and I don't want to become incorporated into those statistics, and neither do my friends or the other women in which I'm trying to do peer education with. And that, as I said, it is criminal that the definition does not incorporate gynecological issues for women, and it presently serves no purpose in terms of women and HIV.